immediately to Mrs. Sarasman, but got no satisfaction from his squire either. The old lady replied somewhat tartly that she had no intention of travelling all the way to Frankfurt again, because Rottenmeier imagined she had seen a ghost. There had never been a ghost in the house, and in the old lady's opinion, the present one would prove to be very much alive. If Radomir could not deal with the matter herself, the letter went on, she should send for the police. Miss Rothermere was not inclined to endure much more, and she had a shrewd idea how to make the sensemen take notice of her complaint. So far, she had not told the children anything else. She was afraid they would be too frightened ever to be left alone, and that would have been most tiresome. Now, however, she went straight to the study and told them in a hoarse whisper about the night visitations. Clara at once demanded that she should not be left alone, never, not for a single second. Papa must come home. You must sleep in my room, she cried hurriedly. Harry mustn't. If Rottenmeier could not deal with the matter herself, the letter went on. There had never been a ghost in the house, and in the old lady's opinion, the present one would prove to be very much alive. If Rothermere could not deal with the matter herself, the letter went on, she shouldn't send for the police. Miss Rothermere was not inclined to endure much more, and she had a shrewd idea how to make this servants take notice of her complaint. So far, she had not told the children anything, as she was afraid they would be too frightened ever to be left alone, and that would have been most tiresome. Now, however, she went straight to the study and told them in a hoarse whisper about the nightly visitation. Clara at once demanded that she should not be left alone, never for a single second. Father must come, you must sleep in my room, she cried. Heidi must be left alone either. We'd be better all day together in one room and keep the light on all night, and then it will have to sleep in the next room, and John and Sebastian had better to be out in the corridor so that they can frighten the ghost away if it comes upstairs. Clara was thoroughly worked up by the time, and Rathame had great difficulty in claiming her. I'll write at once to your papa, and she promised, and put my bed in your room so that you are never alone. But we can't all sleep in one room. If Ada is frightened, Janet shall put up a bed in her room. But Heidi was much more afraid of Janet than of ghosts, of which in word she had never heard, so she was frightened and would sleep alone in her own room. Miss Rottenmeier then went to her desk and wrote dutifully Mr. Servants to let him know the mysterious happening in the house still continued and would threaten things to have a very bad effect on Clara in her delicate state of health. Fright might even send her into fits. He wrote of bring on an attack of St. Vitus dance. Her plot was successful. 2 days later, Mr. C's man stood at his front door, ringing the bell so vigorously that everyone jumped, thinking the ghost had started playing Everyone jumped, thinking the ghost had started playing tricks by daylight. Sebastian peeped through one of the upstairs windows to see what was happening, and at that moment the bell rang again so loudly that there could be no real doubt that a human hand had pulled it. He realized that it was his master and rushed downstairs, almost noticed him. He had urged heels in the haste. Mr. Hand hardly noticed him, but went at once to Clara's room. She welcomed him joyfully, and he was greatly relieved to find her so cheerful and to all appearances much as usual. Clara assumed, and she was really no worse, and was so pleased to see him that he felt quite grateful to the ghost for bringing him home. And how has the ghost been behaving, Miss Rothermere? He asked the lady with a smile. Oh, it's a serious matter, she replied stiffly. I don't think even you will be laughing about it tomorrow. It seems to me that something terrible must have happened here, and you have just got frightened of it. I must ask you not to cast reflection on my entirely respectable forebears, such as, said Mr. Sashman. Now, please send Sebastian to me in the dining room. I want to talk to him alone. He had noticed that Sebastian and Miss Rothermere were not exactly on the best of terms and had give an idea. Come here, he said as Sebastian entered, and tell me the truth. Did you play the ghost to frighten Miss Rothermere? I'll write once to your father, she promised, and put my bed in your room so that you're never alone. But we can't all sleep in one room. If Adelheid is frightened, Janet shall put a bed in her room. But Heidi was more much was Heidi but room in the bed, and they were frightened, and they started the dinner in the wide lawn, in which there were shadows of trees and blowing of winds that scared and haunted the Heidi. The Heidi was, although a little girl, a anxious, a furious, naughty, nasty girl, which was although upon him. Mrs. Rottenmeier had a plan to frighten her and to make her silent in some times of their lessons and in the home. When they went out, Heidi was never left alone because she was so much scared that she always had goosebumps whenever she thought about the blasting scares of the night. Being pushed back, and a key turned and the door opened, Mr. Salmon reached for his cloak. You're not afraid, are you? Asked the door quietly. It's better to be careful, the other whispered back. They each took a light in one hand and a revolver in the other and went out in the corridor. There they saw a pale streak of moonlight coming through the open door and shining on a white figure which stood motionless on the threshold. Who's there? Shouted the doctor so loudly that his voice echoed down the corridor. The boat moved to the waters in the front door. The figure turned and gave a little cry. It was Heidi who stood there, barefooted in her white nightgown, staring in bewilderment at the weapons and the lights. She began to tremble, her lips quivered. The men looked at each other in astonishment. Why, I believe it's your little water carrier, said the doctor. What are you doing here, child? Asked Mrs. Sharma. Why have you came downstairs? Harry stood before him, white as her nightgown, and answered faintly, I don't know. I think this is a case for me. Said the doctor. Let me take the child back to her room while you go and sit down. He put his revolver on the ground, took Sally gently by the hand, and led her upstairs. She was still quivering, and he tried to soothe her by speaking in his friendly way to her. Don't be afraid, nothing terrible is going to happen. You're all right. When they reached her room, he set the light down on the table and lifted Hetty back into the bag. He covered her carefully, then sat down in a chair beside her and waited until she was more herself. Then he took her hand and said gently, That's better. Now tell me where you were going. Now it's very ready, responded Harry. I didn't know I had gone downstairs. I just was there. It's a small hand were cold in Doctor's room. I see he had. Can you remember whether you had a dream when perhaps that seemed very real? Oh yes, had his eye met his. A dream every night that I'm back with grandfather and can hear the wind whistling through the fir trees. I know in my dream the star must be shining brightly outside and get up quickly and open the door of the hut and it's so beautiful but when I wake up I'm always still here in Frankfurt. A lump came in her throat and she tried to swallow it. Have you a pain anywhere? Asked the doctor. In your head or your back? No, but I feel as though there is a grey stone in my throat, as though you had taken a large bite of something and can't swallow it. Heidi shook her head, and no, as if I wanted to cry. And do you sometimes have a good cry? Her lips quivered again. No, I'm not allowed to. Miss Rottenmeier has forbidden it. So you swallow it down, I suppose. You like being in Frankfurt, don't you? Yes, she said, but it sounded much more as though she meant to say no. Where did you leave your grandfather? On the mountain. That wasn't much fun, was it? Didn't you find it rather dull there? The doctor got up and laid her gently on the pillow. You don't know what you are talking about, the protested the doctor. This is not an illness that can be cured with pills and powder. The child is not robust, but if you send her back to the mountain at once, she'll soon be herself again. If not, you might find you have to send her back ill, incurable, or even not at all.